The sun had barely risen above the rolling hills when Martha Thompson stepped onto the porch of her farmhouse. She cradled a steaming mug of coffee in her hands, savoring its warmth against the morning chill. The air was crisp and smelled faintly of dew, a reminder that autumn was settling in, painting the fields with shades of amber and gold. It was a morning like countless others she had spent on the farm. But to Martha, each one held a quiet beauty that never faded. She'd lived here for nearly 40 years. First with her husband, George. And then, after he passed, by herself. The farm had become both her sanctuary and her burden, a place filled with memories and responsibilities that weighed heavily on her shoulders. As she sipped her coffee, her gaze drifted across the open fields, taking in the barn with its peeling red paint and the apple trees in the distance. Still holding on to the last of the season's fruit, she noticed a figure moving near the barn, carrying buckets in each hand. Her nephew, Ben, was already up and working, his presence a welcome sight on these chilly mornings. Ben had come to stay with her a few weeks ago, saying he needed a break from the city. He was in his early 30s, with an easy smile and a quiet strength that reminded her of George in his younger years. Martha hadn't realized just how much she missed the company until Ben arrived. The days felt lighter, the work less taxing, and the long silences around the farm were filled with his laughter and stories. "Morning, Aunt Martha," Ben called as he made his way up to the porch, his voice warm and cheerful. "Good morning, Ben," Martha replied, smiling as he approached. "You're up early." Ben shrugged, setting down the buckets with a grin. "Can't let you do all the work. Can I? Thought I'd get a head start." Martha chuckled. "Well, I won't argue with that. The animals always appreciate an early breakfast." Ben joined her on the porch, taking a moment to catch his breath. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the mist rise off the fields as the sun climbed higher. After a while, Ben turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "Aunt Martha, I've been meaning to ask, how do you manage this place all on your own?" he asked, a hint of admiration in his voice. "It's a lot of work. And you make it look easy." Martha gave a small smile, touched by his words. "Oh, it's not as hard as it looks," she replied, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. "You just get used to it after a while. This farm, it's all I know. And as long as I'm able, I'll keep taking care of it." Ben nodded, his eyes soft with understanding. "Well, I'm glad to be here to help, Aunt Martha. It's nice, being here. Feels like home." Martha's heart warmed at his words. She hadn't expected Ben's visit to be more than a short stay. But as the days passed, she found herself hoping he might linger a little longer. There was a comfort in his presence, a quiet companionship that eased the solitude she had grown accustomed to. "Thank you, Ben," she said softly. "It's good to have you here." They shared a smile before Ben picked up the buckets again, ready to head back to the barn. "I'll finish up with the animals. Why don't you get breakfast started? I'll be back soon." Martha nodded, watching him go before turning and heading inside. The kitchen was warm and inviting, filled with the soft morning light filtering through the windows. She set about making breakfast, the familiar rhythm of cooking bringing a sense of peace. As she cracked eggs and sliced bread, she thought about how much life had changed since George passed, and how Ben's visit had stirred feelings she hadn't felt in years. By the time Ben returned, the smell of scrambled eggs and freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen. He washed up at the sink before joining her at the table, his face alight with appreciation. "This smells amazing," Aunt Martha, he said, grinning as he took a seat. They ate together, sharing stories and laughter. Ben told her about his job in the city. The hustle and bustle that seemed a world away from the quiet of the farm. Martha listened, occasionally offering bits of advice and wisdom drawn from years of experience. She could tell that something weighed on Ben's mind. A heaviness in his words that hinted at more than just the city's demands. Aunt Martha, he began slowly, after a pause in their conversation. Have you ever thought about what it would be like if things had gone differently? If maybe you hadn't stayed on the farm? Martha looked at him thoughtfully. I suppose I have. From time to time, she admitted. But this place is a part of me, Ben. It holds so many memories, of George. Of our life together. Sometimes it's hard to imagine being anywhere else. Ben nodded, his gaze distant. I get that. I think I needed this, a place like this to remind me of what really matters. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in their thoughts. For Martha, the farm was more than a home, it was her history, her identity, and her connection to a simpler, more meaningful way of life. She realized that Ben was searching for something similar. A sense of grounding that the city couldn't provide. Well, you're always welcome here, Ben, she said softly. For as long as you need. Ben looked at her, his eyes grateful. Thank you, Aunt Martha. I think I might take you up on that. After breakfast, they headed out to work in the fields. The sun now high in the sky. They worked side by side, sharing the load and laughing as they teased each other about who could carry the heaviest bale of hay. The tasks that had once felt overwhelming to Martha now felt lighter with Ben by her side. As the day wore on, Martha felt a sense of peace settle over her. A warmth that spread through her as she watched Ben move through the familiar landscape of her life. She realized that he wasn't just helping her with the work, he was reminding her of the joy of companionship, of sharing the beauty of the world around them. That night, after the chores were done and the sun had dipped below the horizon, they sat on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one. The quiet of the farm, once a reminder of her solitude, now felt different, filled with the quiet comfort of knowing she wasn't alone. In the soft glow of starlight, Martha felt something she hadn't felt in years, hope. Hope that, even at her age, life still held surprises. That maybe, just maybe, there was more waiting for her beyond the fields of her farm. The next few weeks passed in a comfortable rhythm. Ben settled into life on the farm as if he had always belonged there. They worked side by side, laughing over shared tasks and falling into easy, light-hearted conversations. For Martha, having someone around who understood her ways and didn't mind the quiet pace of farm life was a gift she hadn't realized she needed. Autumn had come in full force now, painting the trees in shades of red and gold. It was harvest season, a busy time on the farm, and Martha felt grateful for Ben's help more than ever. Together, they moved from field to field, collecting vegetables, apples, and pumpkins for the local market. The days were long, but the work felt lighter with Ben's company. One crisp morning, as they worked in the apple orchard at the edge of the property, Martha paused to catch her breath, leaning against one of the sturdy apple trees. She looked around, taking in the beauty of the season, the way the leaves fluttered to the ground, the smell of the earth, the satisfying crunch of apples as they filled their baskets. Ben, who had been gathering apples nearby, walked over to her with a grin, holding out a particularly large, shiny apple. Look at this one, Aunt Martha. Biggest apple of the season, wouldn't you say? Martha chuckled, accepting the apple and admiring its perfect shape. I'd say so. You have an eye for the best ones. Ben. They both laughed, sharing a moment of lightheartedness that felt as warm as the morning sun. Ben glanced around, looking thoughtful as he leaned against the tree beside her. You know, Aunt Martha, I don't think I've ever felt so at peace as I do here, he said, his voice soft. Life in the city is so loud. But here, there's a quietness that I didn't realize I needed. Martha nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. This land has a way of grounding you. It gives you space to breathe, to listen to your own thoughts. It's what kept me going after George passed. Ben looked at her with a gentle expression. I know it couldn't have been easy for you. Being here alone. Keeping this place going. You're stronger than anyone I know. Aunt Martha. She felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. A mixture of pride and gratitude. It wasn't easy. No, she admitted. But in a way, this farm saved me. It gave me a purpose when I thought I'd lost everything. And now, well, it feels good to have someone here with me. They stood in silence for a moment, letting the weight of those words settle. Martha hadn't spoken much about George since he passed. But with Ben, the memories felt less painful. There was something healing in the way he listened. His presence a gentle reminder that she wasn't alone in her journey. Tell me about him, Ben said quietly. About Uncle George. Martha looked out across the orchard, her mind drifting back to memories of her husband. She could almost see him there, moving through the rows of apple trees with his easy smile and his kind eyes. George was steady, she began, a soft smile on her lips. He was the kind of man who never rushed, who took life one step at a time. This farm was his dream. You know, he wanted a place where we could grow old together, surrounded by the things we loved. Ben nodded, listening intently. Martha took a deep breath, feeling a twinge of sadness but also a quiet joy in remembering. We built this place from the ground up, she continued. Every fence post, every tree, we planted it all together. It's funny. I thought I'd be lost without him. But instead, I found strength I didn't know I had. He's still here, in every inch of this place. Ben's hand found hers, giving it a gentle squeeze. He'd be proud of you, Aunt Martha, of everything you've done here. They stood in silence, hand in hand, each lost in their own thoughts. For Martha, it was a moment of healing. A small piece of her heart finding peace in Ben's quiet understanding. She realized then that Ben was more than just family, he was someone who truly saw her, who respected the life she'd built and the struggles she'd endured. The following weekend, Martha's neighbor, Eleanor James, paid a visit to the farm. Eleanor was a sprightly woman in her 70s with a sharp mind and an even sharper wit. She'd been Martha's friend for as long as she could remember. The kind of friend who could read her thoughts without her saying a word. When Eleanor spotted Ben helping Martha load hay onto a wagon, her eyebrows shot up with interest. She waited until they finished, then marched over with a mischievous glint in her eye. Goodness, Martha, I didn't know you'd hired such a fine young man to help out around here, Eleanor said with a wink, causing Ben to chuckle. Martha laughed, shaking her head. This is my nephew, Eleanor. Ben's staying with me for a while, lending a hand. Eleanor's smile softened. Well, it's about time you had some help, Martha. I was beginning to worry about you out here all alone. Ben grinned, extending a hand to Eleanor. Nice to meet you, ma'am. Don't worry. I've got Aunt Martha's back. Eleanor shook his hand warmly. Clearly charmed. Good to know. Young man. We ladies need someone we can rely on. They spent the afternoon together, sharing stories and laughter as they worked around the farm. Eleanor's visit was a welcome distraction, her lively spirit filling the air with laughter and energy. She teased Ben mercilessly, making him blush as she recounted embarrassing stories from Martha's younger days. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Eleanor pulled Martha aside, her expression turning serious. Martha, she said gently, you've done so much here. And you've kept George's memory alive in every corner of this place. But it's okay to let others in. You know. To let people help you. Martha smiled, touched by her friend's words. I know. Eleanor. I suppose I've grown used to being alone. But Ben, well, he's been a gift. I didn't realize how much I missed having someone to share this with. Eleanor nodded, patting her friend's hand. You deserve happiness, Martha. Don't ever think otherwise. And remember, there's no age limit on finding joy. Life still has surprises waiting for us, even when we think we've seen it all. Martha felt a warmth in her heart, a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. Eleanor was right, she didn't have to carry everything alone. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future filled with companionship, with laughter and shared memories, perhaps even with someone by her side. As the weeks passed, Martha and Ben's bond deepened. They had become more than just family, they were friends, confidants, and each other's greatest support. Every day, they worked side by side, shared meals, and watched the stars together from the porch. And with each passing moment, Martha felt a stirring in her heart, a gentle, quiet sense of belonging that she hadn't felt in years. One evening, as they sat on the porch wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill, Ben turned to her, his voice soft. Aunt Martha, thank you for letting me stay here. I didn't realize how much I needed this place. This peace. You've given me a gift. You know that? Martha looked at him, her eyes filled with warmth. Ben, you've been the one giving me a gift. I thought I was content being alone. But you've reminded me how wonderful it is to share this life with someone. They shared a smile, a connection deeper than words passing between them. For Martha, it was a moment of realization, a feeling that life wasn't just something to endure, it was something to share, to cherish, and to find joy in, even in unexpected places. The days grew shorter as winter approached, but Martha's heart felt lighter, as if she were finally allowing herself to let go of the past and embrace whatever the future held. And as she looked over at Ben, she knew that no matter what happened, she wasn't facing it alone. As the days grew colder, the first snow of the season began to blanket the farm, transforming the familiar landscape into a serene winter wonderland. Martha woke early one morning to find a thin layer of snow covering the fields, the trees dusted in white, and the air filled with the crisp smell of winter. She bundled up in her warmest coat, pulling on gloves and a scarf, and made her way outside to take in the quiet beauty of the morning. The snow crunched under her boots as she walked to the barn. Everything was still, as if the world were holding its breath. The sight reminded her of winters long ago, of snowball fights with George and evenings by the fireplace, warmed by laughter and companionship. She felt a pang of longing, but it was softer now, the ache soothed by the knowledge that she was no longer alone. Halfway to the barn, she saw Ben approaching, his breath visible in the chilly air. He waved and quickened his pace, joining her with a wide smile. Beautiful. Isn't it? He said, looking around at the snow-covered fields. I haven't seen snow like this in years. Martha smiled, nodding. It has a way of making everything feel fresh. Doesn't it? Like a new beginning. They continued to the barn, talking in hushed tones as though they didn't want to disturb the peaceful silence of the snow-covered morning. Inside, the animals stirred, eager for breakfast. Ben went about his work, checking on each of them with the kind of care and attentiveness that Martha had come to admire. She felt a surge of gratitude for his presence, for the way he seemed to understand the rhythms of the farm and the simple beauty of this life. After they finished feeding the animals, Ben suggested they take a walk through the orchard. The apple trees, now bare, stood tall against the backdrop of white, their branches adorned with delicate traces of snow. They walked side by side, their breaths creating small clouds in the air. Aunt Martha, Ben began, his tone thoughtful. I was thinking, I'd like to stay here longer. If you'll have me. There's something about this place that feels right. Like it's where I'm supposed to be. Martha stopped, turning to look at him with surprise and a growing warmth in her heart. You want to stay? Ben nodded, a shy smile crossing his face. I do. I've been searching for something, Aunt Martha, and I think I've found it here. I want to help you. To be part of this life you've built. Martha felt a rush of emotion, her heart swelling with gratitude and joy. Ben, I'd love nothing more than for you to stay. This farm has always been my home. But having you here, it's made everything feel whole again. They shared a quiet smile, a deep understanding passing between them. The snow continued to fall softly around them, blanketing the world in a peaceful stillness. Martha felt as though she were standing at the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with companionship, purpose, and a renewed sense of belonging. As the days slipped by, the farm settled into the rhythm of winter. The holidays approached, bringing with them a sense of warmth and cheer. Ben and Martha spent their days tending to the animals, preparing firewood, and decorating the farmhouse with simple but beautiful touches, evergreen branches, red ribbons, and a wreath on the front door. On New Year's Eve, they decided to host a small gathering for a few close friends, including Eleanor, who arrived with a plate of cookies and her usual lively spirit. Well, look at you two, Eleanor teased as she entered the cozy farmhouse, glancing between Ben and Martha with a knowing smile. I've never seen this place looking so warm and inviting. Must be the company. Martha laughed, shaking her head. It's nothing fancy, Eleanor. But we're glad you could come. As they sat around the fireplace, sharing stories and laughter, Martha felt a sense of contentment settle over her. It had been years since she'd celebrated the holidays like this, surrounded by friends and family. She realized that, for the first time in a long while, she was looking forward to the future with a sense of hope. As midnight approached, they gathered on the porch to watch the stars. The night was clear and crisp, the stars bright against the inky sky. Ben stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. To new beginnings, he said softly, raising his mug of hot cider. Martha raised hers, smiling. To new beginnings. They clinked their mugs together, sharing a moment of quiet joy. The sound of laughter and the warmth of companionship surrounded them, filling the night with a sense of peace and possibility. As they watched the first minutes of the new year unfold, Martha felt a quiet happiness bloom in her heart. She knew that, no matter what lay ahead, she had found something precious, a life filled with love, friendship, and a sense of belonging. The weeks passed, and life settled into a comfortable routine. Martha and Ben continued their work on the farm, each day bringing new challenges and small triumphs. But the quiet companionship between them made everything feel lighter, as if they were walking this path together. One day, Jack Miller, a local handyman who'd known Martha for years, stopped by to help with some repairs. Jack was a tall, quiet man with a gentle manner, known around town for his skill and reliability. Martha had always respected him, though she hadn't thought much beyond their neighborly friendship. As Jack worked on fixing the barn door that had been damaged in a recent storm, he and Ben struck up a conversation, sharing stories about farm life and their love of the land. Martha watched them with a quiet smile, feeling a sense of pride in the life she had built here and the people who had become part of it. After the repairs were finished, Jack joined them for tea in the kitchen, his calm presence adding a new layer of warmth to the house. As they talked, Martha found herself laughing at his gentle jokes and enjoying the familiar ease of their friendship. She realized, with a quiet sense of surprise, that Jack's visits had become something she looked forward to. When he left that afternoon, he paused at the door, giving her a warm smile. "Take care, Martha. I'll be back soon to check on that fence we talked about." Martha nodded, feeling a small thrill of anticipation. "Thank you, Jack. I'd appreciate that." As he walked away, Ben noticed her thoughtful expression and smiled knowingly. "He's a good man, Aunt Martha." Martha chuckled, feeling a touch of embarrassment. "Oh, don't start, Ben. Jack's just a friend." But Ben's smile remained. "Maybe. But I think there's more there than you realize." Martha's heart fluttered at the thought, but she pushed it aside, reminding herself that she was content with her life as it was. Still, as she went about her evening chores, she couldn't shake the warmth that Jack's visit had brought. As winter melted into spring, the farm came alive once more. The fields were dotted with wildflowers, and the trees were filled with the sound of birds returning to their nests. Martha felt a renewed sense of purpose as she and Ben prepared for the planting season, their days filled with hard work and quiet joy. Jack continued to visit, his steady presence becoming a part of their lives. He helped with repairs, shared meals, and even joined them for evening walks through the fields. Over time, Martha found herself drawn to his kindness, his gentle humor, and the quiet strength that seemed to mirror her own. One warm evening in late spring, as they sat on the porch watching the fireflies dance in the twilight, Jack turned to Martha with a soft smile. "Martha," he began, his voice low, "I've enjoyed these past few months more than you know. You and Ben, well, you've given me something I didn't know I was missing." Martha felt her heart swell, a mixture of happiness and anticipation filling her chest. "Jack, I feel the same way. This farm, it's become more than just a place. It's a home. And I'm grateful to have you here with us." They shared a quiet smile, the unspoken understanding between them deepening. For the first time, Martha allowed herself to imagine a future with someone by her side, a future filled with companionship, love, and the quiet beauty of life on the farm. As the seasons continued to change, so did Martha's life. She had found a sense of peace, a place where she belonged, and the love of people who understood and cherished her. And in the quiet of the farm, surrounded by the people she cared about, she discovered that even at 65, life still held beautiful surprises.